ExamPrep.School. Maine Property and Casualty Insurance Adjuster Exam. Exam code 12-ME-31. There are 6 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. Claims, contracts, general property and casualty knowledge, Maine automobile insurance, Maine insurance law, common to property and casualty, Maine standard fire policy. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. Under a homeowner's insurance policy, which form extends personal property coverage on an open perils basis? A. HO2 broad form. B. HO3 special form. C. HO5 comprehensive form. D. HO8 modified coverage form. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is comprehensive form, because this form ensures both dwelling and personal property on an open perils basis, except for those perils specifically excluded. Reason A is not correct. Broad form covers both dwelling and personal property on a named perils basis rather than open perils. Reason B is not correct. Special form covers dwelling on an open perils basis but personal property on a named perils basis. Reason D is not correct. Modified coverage form offers a limited set of basic named perils for personal property, not open perils. Question 2. Which describes the calculation of actual cash value settlement for personal property under a homeowner's policy? A. Replacement cost without any depreciation deduction. B. Fair market value of the property at the time of loss. C. Replacement cost minus depreciation for age and wear. D. Original purchase price of the property. The correct answer is C. The correct answer reflects that actual cash value is determined by subtracting depreciation from the replacement cost to account for wear and age. Reason A is not correct. Replacement cost without deduction describes replacement cost value, not actual cash value. Reason B is not correct. Fair market value may differ from replacement cost minus depreciation and is not the ACV measure in HO policies. Reason D is not correct. Original purchase price does not account for depreciation or current replacement cost. Question 3. Under an HO3 policy, what event typically triggers coverage for additional living expenses? A. A direct physical loss from a covered peril that renders the residence uninhabitable. B. Scheduled personal property values being adjusted. C. Evacuation due to a predicted natural disaster without actual loss. D. Damage from normal wear and tear requiring temporary relocation. The correct answer is A. Additional living expense coverage begins when a covered peril causes direct physical damage that makes the insured residence uninhabitable. Reason B is not correct. Adjusting personal property values does not trigger additional living expenses. Reason C is not correct. Voluntary evacuations without direct damage from a covered peril are excluded. Reason D is not correct. Wear and tear is an excluded cause of loss and does not qualify for this coverage. Question 4. What is the maximum amount payable for the loss of furs due to theft under a standard HO3 policy? A. $500. B. $1,000. C. $1,500. D. $2,500. The correct answer is C. The special limit for theft of certain personal articles, including furs, in an HO3 policy is $1,500. Reason A is not correct. $500 is lower than the standard theft limit for furs. Reason B is not correct. $1,000 does not match the established special limit. Reason D is not correct. $2,500 exceeds the policy's specific limit for theft of furs. Question 5. Under the dwelling D, P1 basic form, which of the following perils is covered? A. Internal explosion. B. Windstorm. C. Hail. D. Earth movement. The correct answer is A. The DP1 basic form insures against only fire, lightning, and internal explosion. Other perils listed are excluded. Reason B is not correct. Windstorm is excluded under the DP1 basic perils. Reason C is not correct. Hail is not part of the DP1 basic peril set. Reason D is not correct. Earth movement is specifically excluded under DP1. Question 6. Mark has a dwelling property special, DP3 policy, with a coverage limit of $200,000. Hail damages his detached garage and fence, resulting in a combined loss of $20,000. How much will the policy pay for the garage and fence under coverage B? A. $2,000. B. $20,000. C. $10,000. D. $40,000. The correct answer is B. Coverage B for other structures under DP3 is automatically 10% of the coverage A limit, so 10% of $200,000 equals $20,000 applied to the garage and fence damage. Reason A is not correct. That amount represents only 1% of coverage A, not the required 10%. Reason C is not correct. That amount equals 5% of coverage A, but coverage B requires 10%. Reason D is not correct. That amount equals 20% of coverage A. The policy limits coverage B to 10% of coverage A. Question 7. A neon sign is permanently affixed to the exterior wall of a commercial building, insured under the Building and Personal Property Coverage Form. After a fire, the sign is destroyed. Under which coverage part will the insurer respond for the sign replacement? A. Coverage B. Business personal property. B. Reason A is not correct. Unforeseeable results fall outside proximate cause. C. Coverage C. Business income and extra expense. D. No coverage. Signs are excluded. The correct answer is B. Permanently attached outdoor signs are considered part of the building and are covered under Coverage A in the Building and Personal Property Coverage Form. Reason A is not correct. Business personal property covers movable property, not permanently attached fixtures. Reason C is not correct. Business income and extra expense covers lost income, not physical damage to the sign. Reason D is not correct. Attached signs are not excluded. They are treated as part of the building. Question 8. A warehouse property owner needs coverage for damage caused by weight of ice, accidental discharge of water from plumbing, and windstorm damage to awnings, but wants to exclude mechanical breakdown. Which causes of loss form should be selected? A. Basic form, named perils. B. Special form with mechanical breakdown endorsement. C. Special form, all risk. D. Broad form, named perils with extended list. The correct answer is D. The broad form specifically names perils such as ice weight, accidental water discharge, and windstorm. It excludes mechanical breakdown, matching the owner's requirements. Reason A is not correct. The basic form does not include weight of ice or water discharge perils. Reason B is not correct. Endorsing a special form still requires additional exclusions. It does not naturally exclude mechanical breakdown. Reason C is not correct. The special form is all risk and would include mechanical breakdown unless specifically excluded. Question 9. In a standard ISO commercial general liability policy, defense costs for liability claims covered under coverage A are handled in which manner relative to the policy's limit of insurance? A. They are included within the limit of insurance. B. They reduce the limit of insurance directly. C. They are paid in addition to the limit of insurance. D. They apply only if a supplementary payments limit is available. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that defense costs under coverage A are paid in addition to and do not erode the limit of insurance, ensuring the full policy limit remains available for damages. Reason A is not correct. Defense costs under coverage A do not count against the limit of insurance but are paid separately. Reason B is not correct. Defense costs do not directly reduce or erode the limit of insurance. Reason D is not correct. There is no separate supplementary payments limit that conditions defense cost coverage under coverage A. Question 10. Under a claims-made commercial general liability policy, coverage is triggered when which event occurs? A. The bodily injury or property damage occurs during the policy period. B. The claim is first made during the policy period. C. The insurer is notified of potential damages prior to policy inception. D. The insured is sued regardless of when the claim was made. The correct answer is B. The correct answer is that in a claims-made policy, coverage attaches when the claim is first made against the insured during the policy period, subject to any retroactive date requirements. Reason A is not correct. Describes the occurrence trigger rather than the claims-made trigger. Reason C is not correct. Early notice may affect coverage but is not the trigger for claims-made coverage. Reason D is not correct. Suits may occur later, but the trigger is when the claim is made, not simply the lawsuit. Question 11. Which of the following offenses is typically covered under the personal and advertising injury section of a standard ISOCGL policy? A. Libel or slander. B. Violations of patent or trademark rights. C. Intentional pollution discharges. D. Reason C is not correct. This time frame exceeds the typical statutory limit and would fail to preserve lien priority. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that personal and advertising injury coverage specifically includes libel and slander offenses, whereas the other listed offenses fall under other exclusions or policy sections. Reason B is not correct. Patent and trademark violations are typically excluded under intellectual property provisions. Reason C is not correct. Intentional pollution is excluded under pollution exclusions. Reason D is not correct. Wrongful termination is an employment practices issue, not covered under personal and advertising injury. Question 12. Which statement regarding the medical payments coverage under a standard ISOCGL policy is true? A. It is triggered without legal liability determination and subject to a per-person limit. B. It provides an aggregate limit applying to all bodily injury claims. C. It reimburses the insured for defense costs associated with medical claims. D. It covers lost wages in addition to medical expenses. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is that medical payments coverage is a no-fault, first-party coverage that applies without establishing liability and is limited on a per-person basis, not an aggregate. Reason B is not correct. Medical payments uses individual per-person limits, not an aggregate limit. Reason C is not correct. Medical payments covers medical costs directly, not defense costs. Reason D is not correct. Lost wages are not covered under medical payments in the CGL form. Question 13. An insured under a commercial general liability policy enters into several agreements. Which agreement qualifies as an insured contract under the policy's definition? A. A verbal agreement to defend and indemnify a supplier for damages arising from a product defects. B. A written assumption of another's tort liability for bodily injury occurring on leased premises. C. A bailment agreement for safekeeping a neighbor's automobile. D. A contract to advertise and promote a third party's products. The correct answer is B. This option meets the policy's insured contract definition because it is a written agreement assuming another's tort liability for bodily injury on premises. Reason A is not correct. A verbal indemnity agreement does not meet the requirement that the contract be written. Reason C is not correct. A bailment agreement for safekeeping does not involve assuming tort liability for bodily injury. Reason D is not correct. An advertising contract does not involve assuming another party's tort liability for bodily injury. Question 14. A roofing contractor completes installation of a new roof. 6 months later, the roofing material fails and causes water damage to interior finishes. Under a standard CGL policy, which hazard classification applies to the damage to the interior finishes? A. Premises operations hazard. B. Products hazard. C. Completed operations hazard. D. Contractual liability hazard. The correct answer is C. Completed operations hazard applies because the contractor's work was finished at the time of damage, and the damage occurred away from the operations area. Reason A is not correct. Premises operations hazard covers ongoing work, not damage after completion. Reason B is not correct. Products hazard pertains to damage caused by a product after it has left the insured's possession. Reason D is not correct. Contractual liability hazard is not a standard classification under CGL policies. Question 15. A nightclub security guard intentionally strikes a patron, causing bodily injury. Under the expected or intended injury exclusion of a CGL policy, how is this claim handled? A. Coverage applies because the act occurred in the course of employment. B. Coverage is excluded because the injury was expected or intended. C. Coverage applies as a personal injury offense. D. Coverage applies but punitive damages are excluded. The correct answer is B. The exclusion applies to bodily injury that the insured expected or intended, so intentional striking is not covered. Reason A is not correct. Coverage does not apply to intentional acts even if done during employment. Reason C is not correct. Personal injury offenses are separate coverages and do not override the intentional injury exclusion. Reason D is not correct. Punitive damage exclusions apply differently and do not permit coverage of the underlying intentional act. Question 16. Which of the following statements correctly describes the liability coverage split limit of 30/60 divided by 25 under a personal auto policy? A. The sequence signifies $30,000 per accident bodily injury, $60,000 total liability per person, and $25,000 per person property damage coverage. B. The series indicates $30,000 property damage per accident, $60,000 bodily injury per person, and $25,000 bodily injury per accident. C. The figures represent a combined single limit of $30,000 for all liabilities, a $60,000 per person limit, and a $25,000 per accident limit. D. The limits denote $30,000 bodily injury per person, $60,000 bodily injury per accident, and $25,000 property damage per accident. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is the one that aligns with split limit notation, which specifies bodily injury per person first, bodily injury per accident second, and property damage per accident third. Reason A is not correct. This reverses the per person and per accident assignments and mislabels the property damage component. Reason B is not correct. This misorders the limits and assigns property damage to the first position instead of the third. Reason C is not correct. This erroneously interprets split limits as a combined single limit and misallocates the dollar amounts. Question 17. Which of the following correctly identifies a difference between medical payments coverage and personal injury protection under a personal auto policy? A. Medical payments coverage includes funeral expenses while personal injury protection excludes funeral costs. B. Medical payments coverage requires negligence proof while personal injury protection applies on a no-fault basis. C. Medical payments coverage is available only in no-fault states while personal injury protection is offered in all jurisdictions. D. Personal injury protection provides loss of earnings benefits while medical payments coverage does not cover lost wages. The correct answer is D. The correct answer distinguishes that personal injury protection extends to loss of earnings benefits, whereas medical payments coverage is limited to medical and funeral costs without wage loss. Reason A is not correct. Funeral expenses are covered by both medical payments and personal injury protection, so this distinction is incorrect. Reason B is not correct. Both medical payments and personal injury protection pay regardless of negligence, so fault proof is not a differentiator. Reason C is not correct. Medical payments is optional in many states and not restricted to no-fault laws, while personal injury protection is required only in no-fault jurisdictions. Question 18. Which of the following statements correctly distinguishes collision coverage from other than collision coverage under a personal auto policy? A. Collision coverage reimburses for vehicle overturn events only, whereas other than collision coverage handles impacts with other vehicles exclusively. B. Collision coverage applies to damage from striking another object or vehicle, while other than collision coverage applies to losses from events like hail, theft, or fire. C. Collision coverage excludes vehicle upset, while other than collision coverage includes damages from collision and physical impact. D. Collision coverage indemnifies losses from fire or explosion, and other than collision coverage covers rollovers and rollovers only. The correct answer is B. The correct answer identifies that collision covers impacts with objects or vehicles, including rollovers, while other than collision, comprehensive, covers non-impact perils, such as theft, fire, or weather. Reason A is not correct. Collision coverage is not limited to overturn events. It also applies to any impact with objects or vehicles. Reason C is not correct. Collision coverage includes upset, rollover events, and other than collision does not cover collision impacts. Reason D is not correct. Collision coverage does not cover fire or explosion, and other than collision does not cover rollovers. Question 19. An insured carries underinsured motorist coverage with limits of $100,000 per person. After being struck by an underinsured driver with a $25,000 liability limit, the insured incurs $90,000 in bodily injury damages. How much will the insured's underinsured motorist carrier pay? A. $65,000. B. $90,000. C. $25,000. D. $100,000. The correct answer is A. Underinsured motorist pays the difference between the insured's damages and the at-fault driver's limit, up to the insured's limit. $90,000 minus $25,000 equals $65,000. Reason B is not correct. That represents total damages without subtracting the at-fault driver's payment first. Reason C is not correct. That amount represents only the at-fault driver's policy limit, not the additional underinsured motorist payment. Reason D is not correct. That exceeds the calculated difference of damages minus the at-fault limit. Question 20. A policyholder and a friend engage in an illegal street race and collide head-on, totaling the policyholder's vehicle. Under the physical damage section of the personal auto policy, what is the insurer's most likely response? A. Pay for the damage under collision coverage. B. Pay under comprehensive coverage. C. Cover repairs under both collision and comprehensive. D. Deny coverage under both collision and comprehensive. The correct answer is D. The personal auto policy excludes physical damage resulting from participating in a racing activity, so neither collision nor comprehensive will respond. Reason A is not correct. Collision is excluded when damage arises from a racing activity. Reason B is not correct. Comprehensive does not apply to collision-type damage or racing losses. Reason C is not correct. Neither collision nor comprehensive applies when the exclusion for racing is triggered. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below. We read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.